Hello and welcome to the famous land on the edge. Right, so what we have here is the CRKT Lanny. And Lanny, well, I suppose short for Roland or Lanzo or Orlando, whichever one of those names you want to apply it to. But in all those cases, those names really mean land or famous land or renowned land. So this a Liong Mah design, and in fact the first Liong Mah design knife that I've had on the edge. So he works out of Palm Beach, Florida. I suppose as if I need to tell you about anything about him. But as a kid, grew up drawing knife designs, drawing knives and designing knives when other kids were sort of doodling on their pages of their books, as we all did. He was drawing knives and later learned CAD and then was able to bring some of his designs to life, and apparently has been designing knives for around 15 years. So this knife, inspired by another knife design, another custom knife, and that's Tony Bose's Lanny, which is a sort of very old school clip point slip joint style knife. So this knife has sort of been inspired by that, and then obviously where it gets its name as well, because that knife was also called the Lanny. Right, so after all of that waffle, once again, I'm going to be doing the usual materials, dimensions and weight, and then dive into design and attributes of this little knife. Right, so we've got a blade. It is a CRKT, so as with most CRKTs, it is aimed at that sort of budget range, that budget market. So we've got a budget blade on this. We've got the 8CR13 MOV. Handle is aluminium. Liners, it's got liners in there, stainless steel, and basically the rest of the hardware is stainless steel. So the clip, the torque screws, the pivot cap, that is all stainless steel. And then the pivot makes use of the CRKT IKBS, well, typically used by CRKT, the IKBS ball bearings, and you can see that little IKBS mark just next to the Lanny name, if I can get a good angle. There we go, on the blade. Right, so that's in terms of materials, dimensions and weight. We've got blade length of 80.65 millimeters, and that is 3.18 inches. Blade thickness is 3.68 millimeters, and that's 0.15 inches. Handle thickness, and that is taken at the thickest point, which is sort of more towards the back of the handle, just behind the clip. And the thickness there is 14.2 millimeters, and that is 0.56 inches. Closed length of the knife is 108.25 millimeters, and that is 4.26 inches. Overall length of the knife is 188.93 millimeters, and that is 7.44 inches. And then weight, and I do have CRKT stated weights, and as I always do, I'm going to check that on my own scale. So let's just get that all lined up and all that good stuff and cranked up. Let's have a look at that. We're on grams, so let's see how it stacks up on my scale. 100 and, well, considerably lighter than CRKT's stated weight. They state 116.23. I get 109. That is way off. Let's have a look and see what that looks like. 3.9 ounces, and they stated 4.1 ounce. So yeah, quite a bit off. Let's just see. I was zeroed. Yeah, well, there you go. But it is a pretty light knife. When you get it in your hand, you expect it to be a little bit heavier than it actually is based on the size, and if you see the thick blade stock on that as well, a 3.68 millimeter blade stock. So let's get that open and start looking at the design and attributes of the knife. So as I mentioned earlier on, based on a classic slip joint knife, the Tony Bose design knife, and it's sort of loosely based on that. This obviously being a flipper, where that's got the Tony Bose Lanny has the little nail neck and really is one of those traditional, almost grandpa style folding knives. But as I say, sort of loosely based on that. So we've got a modified clip, let's get the light at the right angle, modified clip point blade. It is in a satin finish, and we've got a hollow grind, so it is a compound grind. We've got the hollow grind on the main grind, and then a flat grind on the tip, which does mean that the blade is pretty thin just behind the edge, so it does make it a pretty good slicer. The edge, while we're speaking about that, the edge very neat and tidy and was very, very sharp out of the box as well. Just behind that, we've got a big sharpening choil that can act as a front finger choil, and I'll show you that when I get my fingers around the knife. And then I mentioned the flat grind on the tip, and that just means obviously that the tip of the knife is also pretty strong and robust as well. You can see the fuller that is sitting on the flat of the blade, and that looks very attractive. No real practical reason for that to be there. When you get the knife closed, you can't really get that in there to deploy the blade. So I think more for aesthetics, might save a little bit of weight, but again, I'm going to say it's probably more for aesthetics than anything else. Maybe again a little nod to the nail neck on the original Lanny. Spine of the blade, it is that thick blade stock, and we've got very, very aggressive, I'll get there eventually, aggressive jimping on the spine of that blade. In terms of markings, name of the knife there, Lanny, the IKBS little logo on there. We've got a little product code, and then on the other side, as per usual on a CRKT knife, we've got the CRKT neatly etched on the blade there as well. So overall shape, well, a very balanced and classically sort of styled and shaped knife. It does have a general very balanced look about the knife, attractive look to the knife. Attractive in terms of shape. In terms of some of the finishes, I don't know, the jury's a little bit out for me. Not sure that it all works in my opinion. But the handle generally nicely shaped and rounded. The edges, a little bit of a beveled edge around, all the way around the edge of the handle. And then you've got this sort of shaping running on the back of the handle and the front of the handle that generally gives you that rounded shape. And then do I even need to point it out? You can see that hammered look on the handle as well. Very similar to that Shahalem that I had in my hands and in fact acquired quite recently. But all good there. The ergos of the knife, really good. You can see there in terms of size. So in my medium-sized hands, I mentioned that I wear a large glove, mentioned in other reviews, that is. You can see I comfortably get on the knife. It does feel very good. There are no hot spots. Your thumb falls very naturally onto that aggressive jimping on the spine of the blade. Bigger hands, it is one of those knives where you got bigger hands, you're going to sort of stray maybe off the back of the handle, but it is quite a thick handle as well. So generally it does really feel good in your hands. Choking up on the blade, I mentioned that you can choke up. It's a big sharpening choil, but you can, with a little bit of caution, use that as a front finger choil and choke up on the blade. I think more for occasional use. It isn't the most comfortable to use it like that because your finger does start straying a little bit onto that edge. So much more comfortable and safer getting the knife in your hand like that. Right, so some of the finishes on that. So the finish to the handle has a sort of bead blast, maybe sandblast finish to it, and I'm assuming that this is an anodizing, but it doesn't really work to my eye. It looks like it has actually been sprayed, like there's a silver spray on it. Now, I'm not saying that it is. I'm just saying that that's what it looks like. And to me, it sort of cheapens the effect of the knife a little bit. It looks a little bit sparkly almost. To me, it detracts from what is otherwise a very, very handsome knife. And then you've got this mock bolster, the line that runs into the aluminium, that's been machined into the aluminium, that creates this bolster look, but it's not a real bolster. And that obviously, once again, a nod to Tony Bose's Lanny. But again, I sort of feel that detracts from the knife a little bit. If you look at the custom knives, so the Liong Mah custom Lanny, that has real bolsters, and then there's a titanium version of that knife that this probably looks closest to, but the finishes, and yes, I know it is a much more expensive knife, and it is a custom, but the finishes on that just look far better on that knife than they do on the CRKT. And to me, it's more the choice of how they've done the surfacing and the color on this handle that to me doesn't you know, aluminium can be made to look a lot more upmarket than this is, I guess is what I'm saying. So it's not really a cost issue, it's just a decision on the finish that they've gone for. You can see the pops of blue and that color tone as well, quite a bright sort of electric blue to that, and even more so on the pocket clip. And I think this again to me sort of cheapens a little bit the effect on the knife. That's a very, very high gloss, almost mirror polish to that pocket clip, and the color of that doesn't completely match the more toned down color on the pivot cap and on the screws. Anyway, so that's that's my opinion. That is all subjective, but you can see the color difference a little more obvious when you look at the pocket clip and that back spacer, which is sort of a different tone, maybe even slightly greener blue, and it has that stonewash finish, not stonewash, bead glass finish on that, which tones it down a little bit as opposed to that highly polished look of the clip. The clip is tip up, not particularly deep carry, but you can see that is very nicely done. So that has been countersunk into the handles, both the screws and the clip itself, and that is reversible. And on the other side, where the clip fits, you can see a little plate has been created to cover up the mold space for that clip. Now, does that achieve much on this knife? Because it looks so different to the rest of the handle anyway, that I don't know if it was worth the effort to do that. But anyway, that's the route they've taken there. The pivot caps themselves, there's a little bit of a nod to Liong Mah's custom knife, where he has that shield-shaped pivot cap, and you can see that's got that similar sort of shape. It's sort of a rounded triangle shape, and then that shape nicely done on there as well, sort of circular machining on that. The way the light generally catches that does look very, very good. And then the lanyard hole at the back reflects that same shape. So you've got this sort of rounded triangular shape as your lanyard hole in the back of the knife as well. So that looks very, very good as well. Stainless steel liners, I mentioned that when I went through materials, and if you look on the inside, that's been a little bit skeletonized, but more down this side of the handle. No skeletonizing done forward of the handle, so it's around this area on both sides. So on the show side, and if we get a little bit of reflection in there on the lock side as well. Standard liner lock, nothing unusual there. A little bit of jimping on that liner just to make it easier on that lock, just to make it easier to unlock the blade when you want to close it. And then I just briefly mentioned that backspacer, quite a big backspacer, and a little bit of jimping on the back of that. So that also very, very neatly done. Right, I think I've covered off most of the things in terms of shape and so on the knife. So action on the knife, very good. So it is an assisted opener, so a little bit of a push onto that. Oh, I didn't actually speak about that, I suppose. The flipper quite sort of squared off, no jimping on that, and yeah, quite a big flipper, I suppose, in proportion to the rest of the knife, but get hold of that and the knife flies out with that sort of assisted opening. And in general, this very, very smooth action on this. It is on those IKBS ball bearings, but a nice smooth action. You get the resistance of that assisted opening spring, and then you get to that sort of tipping point, and then around there, and then it snaps into place like an assisted opener normally would. So the action on the knife, very, very good. Right, guys, let me just lay the knife down there and quickly do my usual before I do forget that, and that is just to give my gratitude to Blades and Triggers. Once again, a knife that has been supplied by them for me to look over and do a review on. I really do appreciate their ongoing support of the channel, so check this and other CRKT knives and other brands of knives and other tactical goodies on their website, BNT Online. And I guess that leaves me just to do size comparisons before I give a summary of my thoughts on the knife. And I'm going to start with a few other knives that I suppose I've brought out more in terms of the look, and then speak a little bit about the finish, especially that sort of coloration. And the other knife I've brought on, a knife that I haven't had on for quite a while, a very good looking knife, and yes, I know, a far more expensive knife and makes use of more expensive materials, but this, the Zero Tolerance, the 0456, the Sinkovich design, And you can see the same sort of, they've gone for the same sort of look on this, where you've got the silver bead blast finished. In this case, it is titanium, and then you've got the blue pops of color on the clip and on the back spacer. But I think in terms of coloration, just more successful on this knife. The blues, more of a matte finish, a little bit toned down, not that high gloss mirror finish. And then you can see on the backspacer as well, far more matte on the Sienkiewicz design. And then the bead blast, the finer bead blast finish on this titanium, to me, the tone just looks far more upmarket on the zero tolerance, as opposed to this, like I say, has a look about it that it has been sprayed with silver spray. It's sort of and it looks quite rough when you see the texture on it, but it is actually pretty slick. It's quite smooth when you actually get it in your hand. So I'm not sure what the coating on that aluminium is, if it is anodizing, but it does have a little bit of a slick feel to it. Right. Anyway, so let's have a look at the size of those two knives. So the Sienkiewicz Zero Tolerance and the Liong Mah Lanny, a little bit of a size perspective there. And then the other one that I brought in was just this, and this knife did make me think a little bit about this knife, or of this knife, and this is the Kaiser Schill, a Kim Ning design knife. And I suppose what made me think about it is the fact that it's got not the hammered sort of finish, but this a more chiseled finish, but it does give you the same sort of feel, and the fact that you've got the compound grind on the blades, and the size of those two knives very similar as well. But here again, I think the toned down blue on this knife, if they'd gone more for that kind of blue on the Lanny, I think it would have looked better, and then just treated that finish on the aluminium hand a bit different. I'm going on and on about that, but anyway, we're supposed to be looking at size and comparisons. Yes, here we go. A little bit of perspective on those two, and then I will use the usual knives. So let's bring this one in first, and I always say it, I use these knives because I think most people will be familiar with them, and that is, the first one is the Spyderco PM3. Give you some scale there, and then this is still on my desk, so I may as well use it again, and this is the Medford Knife and Tool Slim Midi. Not too dissimilar. The perspective here distorts things slightly, but the Medford Slim Midi is quite a bit longer there. That helps accentuate a little bit. It's quite a little bit longer than the Lanny. Right, and then what else? This knife, the Spyderco Manix 2. Use some scale there, and then the last one that I will pull on is this, and this, as I always do say it, I use because it has been out for so long. And if you like knives, you should know that knife, and that is the Benchmade Mini Barrage. Give you some scale there too. Right, summary of my thoughts on the knife. So likes, generally the look of the knife, the shape of the blade, the hollow grind, the dirty hollow grind now with my grubby paws having been all over it, but the way the light catches that hollow grind and the general shape of that blade, that modified clip point blade, that all really looks good. The fuller looks good. I like the thick blade stock on it. That looks good to me. General shape of the knife, nice. I've mentioned in other reviews when I was looking at that Chehalem, for instance, that I do like that hammered look. So that's all the good stuff. The action, while I'm not particularly fond of assisted openers, the action on this knife, very, very good. I think it is let down by some of the finish choices. The color, the bright blue they've used, that high gloss on the clip, and this particular way, the color of silver that they've used, and that type of bead or sandblast they've done there, for me, just detracts from what, in my eye, if it was toned to my eye, if it was toned down a little bit, would have been a far more handsome and classy looking knife, more in the vein of Liong Mah's custom Lanny knives, and those really do look very good. So there it is. The things I don't like about it are completely subjective things. The rest of it, in terms of its build quality, blade centering, yeah, I suppose not unusual for CRKT, slightly off, not dramatically, but ever so slightly off there. But the rest of the fit and finish and the feel of the knife, really good. And considering the price, I guess a nice option for a EDC knife if you like assisted openers. Check it out. But I've spoken about the fact that I think some of the finish choices, the color choices, I think could have been done a little bit better. And I think, to my eye and in my opinion, it would have been a more attractive knife. But there you go. Maybe you really do like the look of that knife. Go check it out. The rest of it, pretty good, especially considering the price. Guys, and I think that is just about it. So that was the CRKT Lanny Liong Mah design. All that's left for me to do is to thank you for once again joining me. Always really do appreciate it when you do. Would equally appreciate it if you would hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet, and the bell icon so that you can be informed every time I release a new video, because I really would love you to join me more often. And as I have been adding of late, please, if you did enjoy the video, do give it a like. It does help with the algorithms. I'm going to tilt it slightly just so that you can get the blue color a little bit and that hollow grind. There we go. Guys, and other than that, you go well and God bless.